Yeah. Okay, we're beginning over here the Kinnos, and this is an unusual year for each and every one of us. We're sitting here in a room. Those of you that cannot see, there's only about 4 or 5 of us that are together right now. Myself, I'm going to have to apologize in advance. I'm not feeling so well, and I'll try my best to go through the Kinnos as much as we can. But if it becomes too difficult at any point with coughing and stuff, I'm going to have to stop. But we'll try from the beginning. Also, just I take no offense if anybody walks out of the room or anybody goes offline right now. There's about 20 other people, or maybe even more, that are running Kinnos today online. And some of the biggest personalities in all of Klal Yisrael are doing it. And you certainly have a lot to gain from them, much more than I would assume that you have to gain over here. And anyone that wants to go and listen to them, I take no offense at all. I'm actually a little disappointed in myself for doing this because I'd like to hear what they have to say as well. So please do whatever you need to do, and wherever you are on this Tisha B'Av, wherever you are learning, wherever you are saying the Kinnos, the point is that we should grow, and Be'ez Hashem we should grow. The Kinnos, as we know, are the dirge of lamentations that we say on Tisha B'Av. It's very cryptic and poetic and very deep, lofty concepts and ideas that are written by the people who wrote the Kinnos. They're usually above and beyond what we ourselves are able to understand. And we will try our best to try to glean a little bit of a message here, a message there, an insight that we can grab onto that can help us to relate and connect more to this day of Tisha B'Av that is upon us. Kina itself, the word kuf nun hey, is the language of kina, which means to acquire. That if a person really wants to acquire for themselves on this day of Tisha B'Av some kind of connection to the Yom, some kind of connection to the feelings of the loss and the destruction, that which we have going on over here. So the Kinnos, these prayers that we say, these supplications that we are making, these are the ways in which a person is going to be able to acquire for themselves the connection that we are yearning for. We know every single year that it's not easy to connect to Tisha B'Av. Every year it's not. Something that took place 2,000 years ago. Even the most recent of all the horrors for the Jewish people, the Holocaust is already almost 80 years ago. We're far beyond any mass destruction that ever took place for Klal Yisrael. And it's very hard to connect. But perhaps as we go through the Kinnos a little bit this year, we'll see that maybe in our generation, especially what we've been going through the last 5 months of our lives, gives us a little bit more of an intimate connection to this day of Tisha B'Av, and a little bit more of a connection to the Kinnos that we are about to recite. So I want to start over here in Kinnos 6. That's where we begin during the day. And the Kinnos came to a halt. Everything came to a stop. Suru many shimuni oichrai, like it says that our enemies, they said, get away from me. Shavas is a lashon. It's not like when you're driving in a car and you see ahead of you, you see the light turning green, turning yellow, and then you know it's going to turn red, and the cars in front of you are beginning to brake. It's like that time. If anybody's ever been involved, low lane or an accident, when that accident happens, it happens like that. Nobody has any preparation. Nobody was expecting it. Nobody was prepared that the car in front of you is about to step on its brakes and you're going to smash right into the back. Shavas means over here in the Kina that when everything was going along so beautifully in Klal Yisrael, there were Kohanim that were doing their Avodah, there were Leviim that were singing their songs, there were the Jewish people coming up 3 times of the year, Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot, they were celebrating together as one Ba'achdos. There was the Shechina inside of the Beis HaMikdash, like Chazal tell us, Asar Nisim. There were 10 miracles, and whenever you needed a boost in your connection to Hashem, you walked inside and you saw the miracles taking place in front of you. There was learning of Torah, there were yeshivas, there were bachur walking the streets, there were young maidens that were living lives of purity. It was an amazing, amazing time in our history. However, says the King, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to let it go like this forever and forever and ever. Nevertheless, when the final destruction came, it was in an instant, and the Jewish people were not expecting it. They never believed that what Yirmiyahu Navi told them was going to come true. They never believed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could actually get so angry at a nation that was thriving in their mitzvahs and thriving in their learning and thriving in having a Beis HaMikdash in its midst. Baruch Hu puts on the brakes and he stops it all on the drop of a dime. It's brought down over here from. It's brought down here from Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the following idea, and he says like this: Sheteva olam keshadam nifter keshadam nifter lebeis olam. When a person leaves this world, they pass away and they leave this world. Normally, when they die, it doesn't come in like once, all at once. First, the person gets weak, they get sick. It says that by the recreation of the world, when it came to the 7th day of creation, it says, Shavas, Hashem rested, Vayinofash, and he took a break, which means that there was a moment of 6 days of creation which were going on. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was building, he was creating, he was making, he was fashioning, he was forming. Comes along the Shabbos, in an instant HaKadosh Baruch Hu stops everything on a dime, and Shabbos Kodesh comes into place, and everything is relaxed, everything is rest. There's no more creative juices, there's nothing going on anymore in the world. That's the way that Hashem works. When Hashem wants to stop something that is moving in one direction, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can stop it as fast as he wants to. HaKadosh Baruch Hu pasek mimalachtai. Hashem stopped all of his work, and that's what it means over there. Shavas vayinafash, that Hashem, he ceased and he rested in an instant. So too, it's the same thing that we're saying over here in our Kina, and that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his infinite wisdom, as he saw what was going on, and he saw that the Jewish people were heading down a terrible path, and he saw the Klal Yisrael was moving along in a pathway that was not going to be good for them. What did he do? He stopped everything when they least expected that it would happen. And the destruction came really overnight. The one day they went to do such a thing. And as Rav Soloveitchik writes over here, even though that it's true that Yirmiyahu Navi was warning the Jewish people day and night, Hashem's going to bring it, this would happen so soon. That's why it was so difficult and so painful, the gullus and the exile that Klal Yisrael had to go in at that point. Now this is something that for us, and this is why I think it's so apropos that this is the way that the Kinnos begin. Now, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, when he did it so quickly? He wanted the Jewish people to recognize that there is a Ribbono Shel Olam who is running this world. And if you misbehave and you don't treat HaKadosh Baruch Hu the right way, and you don't treat his Beis HaMikdash in the right way, and we don't give it the proper honor and the respect, and we don't learn there, and we don't daven there the way that Hashem wants us to do, and we misbehave throughout the day with Lashon Hara and Gil Arayis and Shvichas Damim and Avodah Zarah, or we don't say brachas on the Torah in the right way, we're not become the best nation that you could become. So when he brings a Shabbos, when he brings something that will stop like that, it's all to jolt us and to wake us up, to make us realize that things are not going on as they once did. Things are not as they seem. And then we're supposed to turn back around and we're supposed to do tshuva. Now, by the first Beis HaMikdash, it took 70 years for the people to do tshuva in the right way. Finally, 70 years later, we were zeicha to come back up from Bavel to Yerushalayim. But this galus, this exile that HaKadosh Baruch Hu ended already almost 2,000 years ago, we didn't stop yet. And everything that goes on, all of these years, all the tragedies, everything that takes place, it's all just an outgrowth of the galus, of this exile itself that we find ourselves in. And so Hashem brought once again an opportunity for us to be jolted and to be woken up by HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways that he can do things in an instant. He rocked the world, as they say in America. He turned everything over on its head. He changed people's lives forever. Our children, we hope that they're going to get over it, but to an extent, our children will never be the same. They got used to a life the last 5 months. It's irresponsible, the kind of life that our children are leading the last 5 months. The Zoom and the computer and the this and the that and no social life and no friends and no rebbeim and no teachers and no learning and no regular Seder Hayom, not a regular, to get dressed in the morning. Our kids are going to go back to school, Bes Hashem. They'll go back in September. Well, they know how to get dressed for school anymore. Tyro is not going to cut it at school. Slides are not going to cut it at school. The T-shirt and the this and the that and rolling out of bed, not going to cut it. They're gonna have to go through a whole tshuva process themselves just to get back into a regular order of events, so they can be able to live like a normal human being again. And all the things, the anxiety and the sadness and the this and the separation, all the different things that we have going on. HaKadosh Baruch Hu stopped everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu stopped everything for us because he wants us to be able to recognize that he's the one that is running the world. But we have to ask ourselves, after 3 months of a coronavirus, I think there's maybe some people not muted. We have to ask ourselves, after all of the months of the virus, did we actually learn the message? Did we actually learn the message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that is running the world? Did we strengthen and affirm our faith more in the power that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to keep things running along the way that he wants it? Did we strengthen ourselves during these 5 months? Or did we weaken? When HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent the Yidden into Galus, when he sent them into exile, what did he want? He wanted them to get weaker, he wanted them to get stronger. The word Galus, we say this out every year. The Sfas Emes writes that the word Galus, exile, is from the word Hisgalus, to reveal, which means that through the exile that the Jewish people go through, that's how we're supposed to reveal and bring out into this world the greatness that is there inside of our neshamas, inside of our souls. Had we remained complacent in one area of our lives, we wouldn't be able to expand it to increase in another place. So Hashem makes a galus, he makes an exile. And in the exile, he crunches us under the pressure. And the reason that he crunches under the pressure is because he wants us to be megaled, to reveal from ourselves the koyach, the strength and the power that is there inside of. He exiled us from our businesses, he exiled us from our families, everything. We're in total exile. There's never been an exile like this before. So that means, did we wake up in the morning? Did we try to make a place in our house where we davened every single day? Did we get dressed before we davened? Did we make it it was a whole thing every single day when we go shachris, mincha, and marv to make sure that we did it? Did we learn a little bit? Did we stay connected on Zoom? Did we do these things? Did we do the best that we could? I can only speak for myself. I know that I didn't. And therefore, this time of Tisha B'Av, when we're sitting on the floor and we're trying to regain ourselves and peer inside of ourselves to see what this golus, this exile has brought to us, did we actually reveal that which was inside of ourselves as HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to? Halavai that we did, but if we didn't, it's never too late. This is why Hashem has given us days like today to sit on the floor, to humble ourselves. It's very humbling to sit on the floor, even if you have a cushion underneath you, but it's very humbling to sit on the floor. Sit on the floor, no shoes, no tie, no hat, no lights, no sound, no camera, no action, nothing. Just sit on the floor together with you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we have to be honest with ourselves. And this is the mourning that we do on Tisha B'Av. The mourning on Tisha B'Av is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed us that He does everything shavas, He does everything in an instant. He stops the world in its tracks. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do that. But how much theories did we speak about the last 5 months? Theories of espionage, the Chinese, theories of Wuhan and the land that was going on over there, theories of it was the Democrats, no, it was the Republicans, no, it was both of them. All the theories that we've been speaking about, how this horrible plague ended up affecting the world. Then we stop and we speak about maybe it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants something out of us, and Hashem desires us to look inside and to be megala, to reveal the kaiches that are within. And therefore we start off with this kina number 6, which is Shavas, which is to remind us that the ultimate power of this world is Hashem Himself. The Maisa that I saw, even though I brought 100 books here, I seem to forget the one book that I need today. But there's a Maisa that I saw yesterday that there was a man, I wish I would remember his name right now, Hyman something. He was one of the builders of the Twin Towers in New York. He was a Jew, let's call him Hyman Goldberg. He was a non-religious Jew. He was top of his game in engineering, and he had built already, by that time he had started building quite a few buildings, and he was getting a good name in the world, and a very big, a giant, wealthy engineer from Japan was asked to design the World Trade Towers in New York. And this man, Hyman Goldberg, his name came up as somebody that was ascending in his field, and they called him and they asked him, and he said, "Wow, what an opportunity! What an opportunity!" And sure enough, I can tell you already, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to go on over here. And sure enough, he went with great diligence and he designed these fascinating towers to the World Twin Towers. Yeah, the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers over there in New York, and he designed them, and they were magnificent. They're the highest towers that you could possibly find in the city of New York. And he got tremendous acclaim as a result of that. The towers themselves, I believe, were built, if I'm not mistaken, they were built in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. Does that make sense? 60s or 70s. I don't remember the dates right now. And they lasted for about 40 years until that one fateful day when the Al-Qaeda terrorists, suicide bombers, whatever you want to call them, they both hijacked their planes and they came one after the other and they knocked the towers down to the ground, killing thousands of people and changing the course of history forever. After the towers came crumbling down, so there was a reporter, and years later, after the whole thing took place, she wanted to get in touch with the people that were responsible for the design of the World Trade Towers. She decided it would be a nice article to write to see how do you feel that all of your hard work came crumbling down to the ground. Now it's already several years later, and you can begin to see the aftermath and the effects. How do you feel that all that work, all that effort, all that ingenious, the ingenious work that you put into it, how do you feel that now there's nothing left of it? So she began looking around at the names of the people that were the builders, and she found this Hyman Goldberg. And she tried tracking him down in America. She could not find him. Finally, one thing led to another. She found out that Hyman Goldberg is now Chaim Goldberg, and he lives in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. And she was able to contact him and have an interview with him. And she said, "Mr. Goldberg," she said, "I'm running an interview over here. We're talking to the people that helped to build the World Trade Towers in New York. Want to know, what does it feel like after you put in all that work and that effort? How does it feel that it was brought down to the ground in an instant like that? So he said, I have to tell you something. He said, when I was building those towers and I was designing, he said, you have no idea the amount of arrogance that went into the building of those towers. I felt that I was building something that was going to be the biggest, tallest thing in the world. Everyone, no matter where they're going to stand in that city of New York, they're going to be able to see it, they're going to be able to look at it, and they're going to be able to watch it and marvel in that which I built. He said, but I want you to know something, he said to the interviewer. I knew that one day, since that these things were made by man, I knew that these things are going to come down. I knew it. I don't know how they're going to come down. I don't know when they're going to come down. I assume they're going to last for a long time. However, I knew that whatever man does, it can't be that it's going to be forever. But I never ever imagined that it would come down in the way that it did. I could never dream in my wildest dreams, acknowledge and believe that there's a God that runs this world. I didn't want to acknowledge that God keeps things going the way that he does, and I'm just a pawn in the whole story over here. And so for many, many, many years, I ran away from the Ribono Shel Olam. However, when I saw all of my hard work crumble in an instant like that, it got me thinking, who's the one that's running this world? Me with all my ingenious who builds the towers? So we're holding over here by Kinnos number 7. And Kinnos 7 begins with the words Eicha. And Eicha are the famous words that we just read in the Megillah last night. Eicha, alas, but really the question is, how could it be? Eicha, how is it possible that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought all this destruction? How is it possible that Hashem brought all of the tears? How is it possible that Hashem brought all of the horrors and the Gehenna that he brought into this world? And this is a question that normally we find the Jewish people, we don't ask so much during the year. We don't ask when we see tragedy, when we see difficulty, when we see pain and suffering going on in the world. We don't always ask, Eicha, how could it be, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How could you have done such a thing? It's not the question that a Jew normally asks. We know the famous words of Rabbi Akiva. Although Rabbi Akiva had a life that was filled with difficulties, Rabbi Akiva would always say the words of Kol Madi Avid Rachmana Latav Avid, everything that Hashem does, it's all for the good. There's no questions asked. His Rebbe, Rav Nachum Ish Gams, used to say, Gamzu l'toiva. Even if the world was crumbling all around him, he would say, this is also for the good. We see around him all of the time. He's being chased by his enemies. Even his own children were chasing him down to destroy him. David HaMelech never complained to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He never said, why Hashem, how could you do this to me? It was always to be mechazik, to strengthen himself and build himself up in his emunah, to understand that Hashem does everything for a reason. So it's uncharacteristic of a Jew that on this day that we are mourning the loss of so much destruction that has taken place on Tisha B'Av, that instead of just being makabel, accepting everything that this is from Hashem, and saying that everything that Hashem does is for the good and we have nothing to worry about, we know that Hashem knows what He's doing, He's running the show just perfectly. So the question is, why do we say Eicha? Why do we say, how could you do this, Hashem? How could you destroy the city of Yerushalayim? How could you make an Auschwitz? How could you have allowed the Inquisition to take place and destroyed hundreds of thousands of the Jewish people and then sent the rest out to wander to the lands? How could you make anti-Semitism in the world beginning to rear its ugly head once again when we thought that we were so safe here in the golden Medina, in the golden state, or in the golden country over here of America? How could you do such things to us, Hashem? How's it possible? So what are we asking? And the answer that is given, how could you make me sick on Tisha B'Av, Hashem? And the answer that is given is that we are not asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, how could you have done this? We're really asking a question on ourselves. And the question is ourselves is, what have we done that caused HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring about all of the suffering that there is in the world? When HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to Adam HaRishon, and Adam HaRishon was running for his life because he had just done the first sin. He ate from the one tree that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him not to eat from. And he was hiding, concealing himself from Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Ayeka, where are you? The same letters, Aleph, Yud, Chaf, Hey, the same letters as Eicha. Ayeka, trying to conceal himself because he just made a big mistake and he doesn't want Hashem to find out. Hashem knew exactly where he was. So when Adam HaRishon was asking, Ayeka, where are you? He was asking Adam, ask yourself, Ayeka, where are you right now? What are you doing? I put you into this world. I created you. You're like a malach. You're like an angel. The angels actually think that you're like God, and they start bowing down to you and praising you. I gave you a whole universe, 99.9% of the entire universe. It's all for you. And he's Dorish Levavos. He goes into the hearts of every single man. He knows exactly what was going on inside of Adam. But if man doesn't know where he is, if man doesn't take responsibility for his actions, if we are unaware of the damage that we cause when we do things that are wrong, so then that will be the greatest, what it does to the Jewish people is because we have brought this treatment upon ourselves. And therefore we ask, how did we allow HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do what he did? You know, there's nothing worse when a child lets their parents down. That's the greatest anguish, the greatest sorrow, the greatest pain. When your child misbehaves, when they act in a way, especially when you're out in public and you thought your kid, my kid behaves better than that. And there you are over there in some public area, and you see all these other kids, they're on the leash. You know, the leash that parents put their kids on, they're like they're a dog. They're on the leash. Oh, I would never have to put my kid on a leash. My kid knows how to behave himself. And then the next thing you know, your kid is acting worse than a dog. He's running around, he's biting people, whatever he's doing. What a busha, what an embarrassment. But they're kids. What about when they get older? They start misbehaving more when they get older. Oh, my kid would never do such a thing. And then they do such a thing. Oh, man, what an embarrassment, what a busha. What a pain to the parent. How could they do such things? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael, I don't hate you. I'm not here to destroy you. I'm not trying to make your life miserable. But I behave. If I let go of the leash and you run around like a wild animal, you do things that you're not supposed to do, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I just can't let that go by itself. So the question of Ayeka and Eicha, they're the same question. The question is, where are you? Meaning, where are you in this story? Where is Klal Yisrael in the story of our history? We know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings goodness, He brings blessing, He brings curse. He already warned us about that. The Torah says, see, I'm placing before you today, habracha v'haklal, blessing and curse. It's all yours. Go and choose. Hashem said it's all there in front of you. You'll choose the path that you want. You'll choose whether or not your life is going to be a life where I'm going to shower down the abundance of blessing, or it'll be a life where I'll shower down, unfortunately, the abundance of curse. But it's up to you, Ayeka. Where are you in the story? And that's what Tisha B'Av is all about. Tisha B'Av is not saying, wow, how could Hashem have done such a thing? Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if He loves us so much, why would He treat us like that? Why would He be so mean? Why would He be so cruel, so ruthless? That's not the question. The question is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu warned us already from the beginning of time. There's a symbiotic relationship between me and between you. When you behave in one way, you get one treatment. When you behave in another way, you get another treatment. So the question is, as we look through all the struggles of the Jewish people over the generations, Ayeka, where are you? What have you done for this? So again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we go back to coronavirus. The question that must be resonating in our minds is, Ayeka, where are we in the whole story? Why did Hashem have to do it? We're not Nevi'im, we're not prophets. We can't know exactly for sure why Hashem did what He did. What did He see in our faults and our actions and our mistakes? We don't know for sure. But Eicha Hashem, how could you have done such a thing? How did you exile? You want us to be exiled from our shul? Does a father ever want his son out of the house? Tell me. Does a father ever want his child out of the house? Does a mother ever not want her child to come home? Every parent wants their child to come home. They look forward to the moments when they come home. Does a mother ever just send them out like that? No. So why'd you send us out, Hashem? Why is it still not normal? Why do we still have to wear masks? Why do we still only have 6 feet apart from each other? Unless you go to other parts of the world where they can't tell you whether it's right or whether it's wrong, but right now it's abnormal for us. You go to a store, if you stand too close to the person, they give you a glare like you just knifed them in the back. God forbid. Sorry, I was 5.5 feet. Forgive me, please. It's a new world. But Eicha, where are we? That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to ask ourselves. Now, there is a big question that I saw this year that the commentators ask. The Gemara tells us the following. The Gemara says, on the pasuk in Koheles by King Solomon, "V'shabachti ani as simcha." I praise simcha. I praise joy. That's the simcha shel mitzvah. That's the joy that a person has when they're engaged in a mitzvah. Well, the simcha maza oiseh. But as King Solomon also said, what's simcha? What's happiness and joy all about anyway? So simcha she'enu shel mitzvah. The Gemara says that's when you're involved in hailulus, when you're involved in foolishness. You're not involved in the happiness and the joy that a person can. What was his plan? His plan was the following: is that you have a secular Jew who's entrenched in secular life. He's eating treif. He doesn't keep Shabbos. He doesn't put on tefillin. He doesn't put on tzitzis. He speaks lashon hara all day long. He doesn't learn. He's watching TV all day long. So what do you want from this guy? You want this guy to understand what Kedusha is? No way. So bring him to me for 4 to 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it was in the summertime. He says, we're going to give him kosher food. We're going to give him a pair of tefillin. He's going to make his own tzitzis and wear them. He's going to daven the best he can every single day. Following way. If Yirmiyahu Navi is here and he's giving all of these prophecies about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and he sees all the things that are going on, he sees the Jewish people doing terrible atrocities. They're sinning in the cardinal sins, and he sees that they're not learning Torah the way that they should be, and he sees that the nation is falling apart, and he's warning them again and again and again with prophecies, which means that the Shekhinah revealed itself to Jeremiah, to Yirmiyahu the prophet, that the Hashem is going to come and bring destruction to the world. And Eicha itself was written by Yirmiyahu, is coming on the heels of the destruction itself. So that means he had prophecy while the destruction was going on. How can you have prophecy, which means you have to have the Shekhinah in your life, if you're watching the greatest Gehenna on earth taking place, which means there's no way that Yirmiyahu was happy at this moment. There's no way that he was rejoicing. Yay, the Jewish people are being destroyed. The base of Mikdash is burning up in flames. There's blood dripping down the streets. Fantastic. Hashem, give me a Nevuah prophecy right now. Doesn't work like that. So the only way that Hashem can bring prophecy is when the Shekhinah is there. The only way the Shekhinah is going to be there is if you're doing mitzvahs, besimcha. You Yirmiyahu Navi, you're giving terrible admonishment over here that the Jewish people are misbehaving themselves, and now the temple's lying in ruins, and you're writing Eicha as the temple's lying in ruins. How do you have prophecy in such a situation like that? Of the base of Mikdash? How's the Shekhinah revealing itself to you in those terrible moments of pain? So the Yismach Moshe writes the following. V'yesh lahamtik advarim ki atoiva shebechol atoiva isu yiskarvus laHashem yisbarach shemai. You have to be a maimon, you have to be a person who believes in HaKadosh Baruch Hu to understand what the Yismach Moshe is saying over here. If our emunah is weak in the Rebbeinu Shalom, then we're going to say these words, it won't make a difference to us. But a person who believes in the Rebbeinu Shalom, and he believes that he's running the world, and we believe that he's watching everything that we do, and he's interacting midah k'neged midah, measure for measure, then we'll be able to appreciate these words. The great V'hara Gedolah, the worst evil in the world, Shebekol harois, from all the evils. I'm telling you, it says the Yismach Moshe, worse than Auschwitz, worse than the destruction of the base of Mikdash, worse than the Inquisition, the worst evil in the world. Hisrachakos is when a person is distanced from Hashem. You could be living in this world and you could look like you have everything going on around you. Money, wealth, health, fortune, charisma, good looks, everything, got it all. But if you're misrachik, if you're distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's nothing worse in the world than that. On the other hand, you could be in Auschwitz, and there are thousands of Jews that are being cremated every single day, and you could have watched your mother and your father and your children be killed in front of you, but you are Kinnos, and our eyes are blind to understand this. Says the Yismach Moshe, I'm telling you the emes, I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you two basic things that if you think about this all of your life, you'll live your life differently. One is, the greatest good in the world, get close to Hashem. The worst destruction in the world, be far away from Hashem. But our hearts are closed, and our his eyes are wide open. ואין לך שמחה גדולה מזו, מזה שהעונשים שמקרבים אותנו אליו אך יזרחוס גדול. You have to listen to the words. These are not my words, so don't get angry at me. Says the Yismach Moshe, the reason that Yirmiyahu was able to rejoice in these moments of terrible pain for the Jewish people, because he knew that when there's punishments that are coming to the world, the punishments are coming to cleanse the Jewish people of the sins that they did, and it will end the hisrachakus, the distance that exists between Klal Yisrael and the Rebbeinu Shalom. And this destruction, these bad tidings, these hard times that befall the Jewish people, it's actually the seed of the cause that will bring us back to the ultimate good, which is Dveikis and Iskarva's closeness to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Ulami sheyesh lo leiv lahavin, anyone whose heart can understand this. Yaskil ki ein zera mi'etzem ha'avera amarachik mi'ito yizbarach. You'll begin to understand that what you're watching and witnessing with your own eyes is not really evil. Rather, the punishment that comes to this world as a result of the misdeeds that we do is actually good, because it brings us close to Hashem. V'chein Kinnos haisa simcha mitzat. And that's why he writes, even when we say the Kinnos over here, and when Yirmiyahu is lamenting in Eicha, and he's lamenting everything that took place, there's a certain level of joy. Perhaps that's why we find in the middle of Kinnos it says, Chazdei Hashem ki lo samnu, ki lo cholu rachamav. In the middle of all the destruction, we say, Chazdei Hashem, your acts of kindness are so great, Hashem. They never cease from the Jewish people. Because even destruction, if we end up going through in history, as painful as it is while it is going on, keep in mind, says the Yismach Moshe, why is Hashem doing it? You know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing it? Because He wants you to get close to Him. And He saw that whatever it is that you're doing in your life right now, you're getting distant. And distance is raw, that's evil, that's bad. Closeness is the ultimate good. And sometimes He stops, He puts the brakes on. Sometimes instead of the brachas, He sends the klala. Instead of the health, He sends the sickness. Instead of the parnas, He sends the poverty. Instead of the simcha, He sends the frustration and the pain. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do that? Says the Yismach Moshe, in words of tremendous amunah, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares about us. And that's called chesed, and that's called good. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings pain and suffering, it's not bad. What's bad is what we were before the pain and suffering, when we were moving farther away from Hashem. This that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings all of these hard situations in our life, it's just to bring us back to the ultimate good, the Hiskarvus. Upon Yirmiyahu and Navi during these times, sheyesh bo simcha gedola bechad tzad, because of the tremendous simcha, the joy. Sounds too hard to imagine. But Yirmiyahu Navi was mourning and lamenting on one hand, but he was rejoicing because he knows that it means HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not abandon Klal Yisrael. And it means that we're heading down the wrong path, we're doing the wrong things, we're getting farther and farther and farther and farther away. Hashem says, I'll stop you. I spoke to a person not so long ago who went through maybe 20 years of Gehenna. 20 years of Gehenna in his life, what he had to deal with. And he said to me, I know that if it wouldn't have been for those 20 years of Gehenna, I would not be the person that I am today. I was cruising along on automatic pilot. I was living my good frum life the way that I always did. And I went to shul, and I davened, and I learned, and I talked about Emunah, and I talked about Hashem, and I helped hundreds and countless of people do what I had to do. He says, but the 20 years of Gehenna that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put me through, I know that the reason is because it made me who I am today. And the relationship that I have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu today, after 20 years of going through Gehenna, is so much more fulfilling and so much more meaningful and so much more powerful than what it would have been any other way. I have no kindness, I have no complaints on the Rebbeinu Shalom, on Hashem at all. And that's what we're saying over here. Yirmiyahu Navi is telling over the Jewish people with Nevuah, with the Shechina, with not atzvus, not depression. He is not forlorn, he is not despairing right now. Rather, there's an element of simcha, of joy. And the joy is that I rejoice in the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is changing our direction and our path right now, and He's going to bring us to... There's a fascinating, a very powerful story of a young 8-year-old boy by the name of Joey Forster. However, even though he was 8 years old, he looked like he was 4 years old. He was very sickly from the time that he was 4. and he was not growing like other boys grew. His body parts didn't grow, his head didn't grow. He just looked like a very sick child, well below average of his age. And the fact that he lived until he was 8 years old, that itself was a miracle. Nobody even imagined that a boy with such a rare disease as this would end up living that long. Nevertheless, to his parents, Jack and Elaine, this miracle wasn't enough. They wanted their son to get better. They wanted him to get healthy. They wanted him to grow and to thrive and to live a normal life like all other children. They went to all the doctors, and no matter which doctor they went to, the doctors could come up with no words of consolation or encouragement. They said it's such a rare disease, we don't even know how to treat it. So one day, they were speaking to one of their cousins over there in Cleveland, and the cousin said, listen, you went to all the doctors, you tried your best. I'll give you one last idea. There's a rabbi who lives here in Cleveland. His name is Rav Yisrael Brag. Happens to be a grandson of Rabbi Avigdor Miller. And Rabbi Brag is known as a rabbi that's able to offer encouragement. He gives strength and hope. And I don't say he's worked miracles, but he's given a lot of people a new direction in life that's helped them when other people cannot. Look, you're down and out. I know you're not religious. Rabbi Brag is religious. Maybe it's worthwhile just to go and visit with him and meet with him and see what he has to say. So Jack and Elaine said, at this point, what do we have to lose? So they called Rabbi Brag. They made an appointment. The next thing they knew, they were sitting in his office across the table in Rabbi Brag, and they were pleading for, please, one glimmer of hope that you could give us. And Jack says, as it stands now, Rabbi, the doctor said we stand to lose our son. He's ebbing every single day. We don't know what to do. Please, is there anything you could advise us to do? So Rabbi Brag looked at these poor parents. He saw how heavy the sadness was. And he wanted to help them so that their little Joey would be able to get better. But he said, give me some time to look into the illness of your son. I need a few days so I can understand better to find out everything that he possibly could about this illness. And he was astonished to find that there's only 30 known cases in the entire world of this particular illness. And with so few incidents to make a case study of, the research and documentation is nil. There's almost like nothing there. And therefore, the doctors actually have no idea how to battle this sickness. And that's why it looks like it's a losing cause. But in the eyes of Rabbi Brag, he called the parents back and he told them the following. He said, Jack and Elaine, I don't have to tell you how precarious your son's situation is. He said, but I want to tell you what I think. And I want to advise you as I believe in a way that could help you. The first thing that I need to ask you is the following. Do you believe in God? And they said, I guess so. Okay. So as I see it, the main point to consider is that this is a very, very strange and rare disease. It happens to almost no one else in the entire world, only 30 cases. But your family has been singled out to deal with this disease. Man. God himself is leaving you with no other conclusion. There's nothing genetic. There's no bacteria. There's no virus. There's no birth defect. Nothing. Something so rare can only be from the hand of God. The way I see it is the following, says Rabbi Brag. Hashem has been ringing on your phone for many years already, and you ignored it. And now you have to pick up the phone and you have to listen to what God is telling you. And if you pick up the phone and you answer his calls and you listen to what he has to say, things could actually be different. Why did you? And he gave me so much mussar that night at the table for what I was doing here in Los Angeles, California, and how I wasn't doing enough in the world of learning and teaching and kiruv and everything. You have to know Rabbi Brock. So all Rabbi Brock could sit around this, across from this family, not religious family, whose son is dying. They barely believe in Hashem, and he tells them, you have to acknowledge it's God's hand, don't you? This is all the Rebbe Shalom, isn't it? So now you know if someone came to my house, they could ring on my bell, said Rabbi Brock. I think I'd answer the door, finally an answer, and ask the person, can I do something for you? Do you want something? I think you have to do the same thing right now. Now this obviously was not the answer that Jack and Elaine were expecting to receive from Rabbi Brock. They thought he has some treatment, some medical cure, some wonder. He's going to give them some bracha, blessing, incantation, and the son's going to get better. And they were crestfallen. And now they're saying they should blame themselves that their son is sick because they didn't listen to what God had to say. So they started getting a little antsy and upset. And Rabbi Brock saw that they were resistant. And then he said to them very firmly, this is what I think God is telling you. And he said, your son has an illness that medicine cannot cure. Only a miracle can give him the health that you want him to have in a normal life. But you have to deserve a miracle. So what do you need to do to deserve a miracle? And he said, I can understand if you find this very hard to believe. But you don't just have to believe this just on faith. He said, let's make an experiment. The doctors make experiments. And Jack was thunderstruck. And he said, Rabbi Brock, please help us. Help us, please. Don't you see what's going on over here? The next morning, early in the morning, Rabbi Brock's phone rings. And from the caller ID, he sees that it's coming from the hospital. Hello? Rabbi, it's Jack. Jack, what's going on? Why are you in the hospital? You don't know what happened? You. He says, listen, Jack, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. Again, you have to know Rabbi Brock. Only Rabbi Brock could say this. He says, Jack, you make a deal with Hashem right now. And you tell him, you can't force your wife to keep mitzvahs. You can't force your wife to be frum. But you are willing to keep my son alive, even if it means moving on in this marriage, because I can't force my wife to be religious. And within a short time, dramatically, Joey's health began to pick up. And the doctors once again said, it's a miracle. We began to follow his Torah. We began to ask ourselves, what Hashem wants from us? Eicha. What does Hashem want from us? And we started to act accordingly. And our son came back from the dead. And here he is tonight. Tisha B'Av is a time that a person just asks themselves, what does Hashem want from me? And if we are honest and we are sincere and we answer in the right way, then instead of sitting on the floor singing the dirge of Eicha, like Yirmiyahu rejoiced that the Jewish people once again would be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we too will rejoice when we come singing and dancing with his carvers, with closeness to Hashem. We'll give a moment now to read Kinnos number 7. Kina number 8. How the wailing in the mourning and the lamentations of the Beis Hamikdash reach beyond all of the suffering and the pain over here in this world, but rather it reaches to a much higher place. It reaches up into the heavens, into the Shemayim. Rav Soloveitchik points out over here, as is the general pathway of all of the Rishonim and the Achreinim, that we have to know that the Beis Hamikdash itself was not just a churban, not just a destruction of a historical event that affected the Jewish people, but rather it was really what he calls a cosmic catastrophe. It was something that transcends this world. Chazal tell us that there's a Beis Hamikdash lamata, there's a Beis Hamikdash down here in this world, and there's a Beis Hamikdash lamala, there's a Beis Hamikdash up there in the heavenly realms. And whatever is taking place in the Beis Hamikdash lamala, that's the way that it's going to look down here in this world. And vice versa, the way that we are treating the Beis Hamikdash lamata, that will either give the power or diminish the abilities for the Beis Hamikdash lamala, the powers up above, to come down. And really what's going on is that the Beis Hamikdash is considered to be the center of the entire universe. As is brought down by the Maharal in the beginning of the Chumash, it says that where HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world from that one little patch of dirt which created all of this universe, so that one little place where he stretched out the entire globe, that itself is the Makam HaMikdash, that's the place, the center of the world he calls it, which is the place where the Beis HaMikdash eventually would stand. Which means that the center of the entire universe, the place where all of life emanates from, all of this world comes from, the place in which all of the planets and the celestial beings, they're focused because they do have a relationship to this world as well. The source of everything is really the Makam HaMikdash, the place where the Beis HaMikdash itself once stood. That land over there. Today there's this golden dome that's there, but not really. It's the Makam HaMikdash, the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the entire world from. And the koyach, the power that is in there, means that it generates its energies and generates its goodness and generates its ruchni, its spiritual content to the entire universe. And so when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it was horrible for us, of course. It was the end of our glory. The majesty of Klal Yisrael, bits of the Beis HaMikdash were to this world. If they would have understood that they themselves were the beneficiaries of all of their goodness and their bracha, instead of coming to destroy it, they would have sent in the armies, the legions of soldiers, the Marines. They would have sent in tanks. They would have sent it all in to stand by the walls of the Beis HaMikdash to make sure nobody would lay one finger on this holy edifice. Because even the non-Jewish world, they would benefit from this building being there. We know that when the Chavetz Chaim used to walk through the streets of Radin, and he would walk around the outskirts of town, the non-Jews saw the Kedusha, they saw the holiness on his face. And they would beg him, please, Rabbi, walk through our fields, walk through our vineyards, Walk through our orchards. You'll bring us blessing. You'll bring us goodness. Please, Rabbi. They were able to see the Kedusha, the holiness that was on his face. They understood that this is a man of bracha. This is a man of blessing. The Manchester Rosh Hashiva, who was called, they said maybe was the Chavetz Chaim of his generation, because he did so much for the laws of Lashon Hara. But his face also radiated and shined Kedusha and holiness. He was once in the hospital. He was there for, a week or 2 weeks. And there was a non-Jewish family staying down the hall. And one of the sons of this woman who was in the hospital, he kept seeing the face of this holy tzaddik shining from his room. And he walked into the room one day and he said, "Can I ask the rabbi a favor?" And the man said, "What can I do for you?" He said, "My mother is very, very sick. She's very ill. Could you give my mother a blessing that she should have a healing, a complete healing?" And so the Manchester Rosh Hashiva gave her a bracha, and in fact she got better. If that's what one Jew can do to this world, they can bring blessing, they can bring health, they can bring goodness into this world. Can you imagine then what a place like the Beis HaMikdash is going to bring into the world? And therefore, the destruction is not for us. The destruction is the world itself does not look like what the world is supposed to look like. With all the meshugas that goes on in the world today, we have to understand it only looks like that because there's not a battery pack that's flowing out all the directions in this world. There's not a source of our Kedusha. We don't have that. Yeah, we have yeshivas and we have learning and we have shuls. We have all of that. But they're minuscule. They're only microcosms of a Beis HaMikdash. They only have limited abilities of what they could pump out into this world. And therefore, says the Kinnos over here, that the welfare of the cosmos, which means the entire universe, is at stake because Yerushalayim is lying in ruins and the final redemption and the salvation has not yet come in place. And that's what we're davening for. We're not only davening for ourselves, we're davening for the Beis HaMikdash to be rebuilt, because then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingdom, love. He says you have a watch. He said in the watch there's a lot of parts that are moving behind. When you open it up, you see there's a lot of different wheels, a lot of different gadgets, a lot of different things that are moving around over there. But there's one central piece that's in the center. That's the center wheel that everything runs based on that. If that wheel is not there, if that wheel is broken or damaged or it's not running, so then all of the other mechanisms that are there inside the watch are not going to work, even if they're healthy, even if they're good, even if they're strong. If the center part is no good, the whole watch doesn't work. Says Rabbi Nachman, the same thing is by the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash is the central cog of the entire universe. And everything is running based upon that. And if the Beis HaMikdash is not in its place, then all of the moving parts of this world, the Jewish people, our lives, our health, our parnasa, our schools, our children, our yeshivas, our history, the non-Jewish world, politics, craziness, anarchy, everything we see going on, if the cog in the middle is not running and functioning the right way, then everything else in the world begins to fall apart. And are we witnessing that today? Are we witnessing? We live in America. We thought that we lived in a country that was invincible. We thought that this was a country that would never fall. It would never crumble. It would never become like one of those other nations that is laid by the wayside. We thought never over here. We're mighty, we're strong, we're the All-American, we have the All-American blue and the colors and the stars and everything. And yet, it hasn't taken that long. We're all watching, whether you watch the news or you do yourself a favor, you don't watch the news, but you hear what's going on, you see what's going on the streets. you begin to recognize that this country that we once knew to be so strong and so solid, it's crumbling at every core. It's crumbling in politics, it's crumbling in hatred, it's crumbling in strife and derisiveness. There's anarchy on the streets. There's people that are claiming that they're going to rewrite history and they'll knock down statues and everything because it's no longer part of who we are. There's hatred against police and against powers and everything. And the country, in a few short months, has shown the real colors of what America really is all about, and it's crumbling. But you know what, says the Kinnos over here? You don't have to blame it on the Americans. Well, we can blame it on the Democrats, we'll blame it on the Republicans, they'll blame each other, we can blame whoever we want. We can blame it on the mayor over there, blame it on this one. Go ahead, point the finger. Says this Kinnos, you know what to blame it on? We blame it on the fact that there's not a Beis HaMikdash in the world. If there was a Beis HaMikdash in the world, never would there have been such a thing called democracy. I know I'll get myself into trouble, especially when I'm online right now. The 17th day in the month of Tammuz, which was the very beginning of the 3 weeks of that year. That means this entire country, which is running away from everything that it tried to run away from, to create a country that's going to be filled with rights, which the rights that we decide for ourselves what we are entitled to. A country which is going to constantly having social norms that are going to be changing over the generations because we decide things have changed. A country that will pride itself on democracy, which means that we believe that we are qualified enough to decide who can run the country, who can make the rules, who can tell us what to do. This entire country itself was established, got its independence, we'll call it, on Shivasa B'Tammuz, on the 17th day in the month of Tammuz, which itself is the day in which all of the troubles begin to fall the Jewish people, the beginning of the 3 weeks. If there would be a Beis HaMikdash, there wouldn't be a Shivasa B'Tammuz. If there would be a Beis HaMikdash, all of the problems that began as a result would not start. The Torah we know is not made up of rights. It's not human ideas. These are the God-given responsibilities and obligations that each and every one of us have. They are immutable. They do not change. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not change a mitzvah in his Torah. Man will change his laws. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not change a single holiday. We will not add any holidays. Man will take away holidays, they'll add holidays, whatever is good for Hallmark and is good for getting off of school and barbecues in the backyard. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will never, ever take away a piece of our history. That's why Rav Yaakov Weinberg used to tell us, he used to say that one of the proofs that the Torah was written by HaKadosh Baruch Hu and nobody else is, look how many mistakes he wrote of the Jewish people inside the Torah. He doesn't hide our past or our history. He writes it all in there black and white for the whole world to see. Man sinned in the beginning of creation when he ate from the tree knowledge of good and evil. Cain and Hevel, they killed each other. Yeah, that's also a bad thing. And then he goes to all the stories that are there inside the Chumash and you look. And what about Klal Yisrael, our nation, the chosen people? Complainers, sinners, rebellious, all the stick-neft, all the different things. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't alter history. He doesn't say, let's go back and rewrite the history book of the Torah. No, on the other hand, he says, that's who we are. Learn from your mistakes. But when man is in charge of his destiny, and when man would like to create the reality that he lives in, so then we could just come along and erase, change, we'll make amendments. Amendments means I didn't know I was such a lowlife, so therefore I have to make a new amendment into the thing over here to say that I'd like to do this now as well. This is not the world of Torah. And this is not the world of the Beis HaMikdash. We're living in a world where there is no Beis HaMikdash, and therefore, since that there is no Beis HaMikdash, therefore, we're watching Chorban take place in front of us all the time. And that's really the mourning that we're doing over here. We're mourning the fact that it's more than just the loss of a building of stones, not once but twice. It's more than just a Inquisition and a Crusades and a Holocaust which took place during these times of the year. It's more than just the rise of anti-Semitism all around them, or as we sit here in America, so many people have told me over the last several months, they're already making sure that their passports are up to date because at any minute, they're gone. Any second, depending what happens in the next election, everybody's 1 foot on the plane, 1 foot out the door. They're out of here. But the only reason that we're witnessing all of this is because it starts much earlier. And that is that when there's no Beis HaMikdash in the world, that means the Shekhinah has no place to dwell, the world becomes an awful place. It's damaged goods. The one cog, the one wheel that runs the entire unit, it's gone right now. And that's what we are mourning for today. Rabbi Yechiel Spiro tells over a beautiful story about himself. When he was a yeshiva bacher learning in the Mir, must go back quite some time. He said as Tisha B'Av came, he figured to himself, he's in Eretz Yisrael, what an opportunity. He said he wants to go and have a tremendous, tremendous experience that he would never be able to have in America. So he figured he should go to the Kaisal Marav, he should go to the Wailing Wall. That must be the place. I was talking there once on Tisha B'Av. It's something, a sight to behold. But he was actually informed that there was a minyan not far from the Mir Yeshiva, right there in the Beis Yisrael neighborhood, of old tzaddikim that gather on Tisha B'Av night, and the way in which they go through the reading of Eicha is like nothing that you would ever see before. And he was told that if you really want to get a chizuk, you really want to have a real, meaningful Tisha B'Av, you should go to this shul over there. So sure enough, he was walking down the streets in an area called Bate Nathan or Bate Nosan, I don't know what it's called, yeah? Bate Nathan, yeah? And he follows a group of Bachrim and they're walking, and he sees them walking through an alleyway and they go up 2 flights of stairs, and he figures we're all going to the same place. They must have got the same information as me. And this is the moment that he walked into this small shul, he knew that he was in the right place. He says, it was hard to describe. He said it's as if he walked into a house filled with mourners. He said the visitors were easily distinguished from the regulars who always daven there. The young American yeshiva bachim, they came for the experience, but the people that were really there, they were these old Yerushalmi men. And the shul, he said, was packed to the rafters. And he was looking around for one space. He couldn't find a space. Finally, he sees on the top steps of the Aron, there were steps leading up to the Aron Kodesh, he saw one little tiny space. And so he goes and he sits down. And he looked down at the clock, wondering when Mariv is going to begin. But it looked like the clock was broken. The time wasn't right. So he pointed out to somebody, what's with the clock? They said, this place does not exist in regular time. It's Lamaila Min Azman. It's above the nature of time. They have their own time. Don't worry. They know what they're doing. And suddenly, Mariv begins. It was a very long davening, heartsick. There's already tears in the room. It lasted for quite some time. And then everybody sits down on the floor. And suddenly, as Rabbi Yechiel Spiro, a young yeshiva bacher at the time, sits down, he sees an old yid with a long white beard, the piercing blue eyes, walks right up to that one little empty space between Yechiel Spiro, and he sits down. And he pulls out his scroll of Eicha. And he begins laning Eicha. And Yechiel Spiro says, at least that's what I think that he was laning. Because after the opening words, Eicha, the man began crying so uncontrollably. He cried for the entirety of the rest of Megillas Eicha as he was singing. This haunting voice, broken crying, a man that was bitterly sobbing for a half an hour over here, like he had lost a parent or a child. And when he was finished, Yechiel Spira looks around the room and he sees every single one of the regulars, all of these old Yerushalmi men with the long white beards, sitting there all sobbing and heaving as they go through the words of Eicha. And as the man concludes Eicha, he looks up and his eyes are all bloodshot and swollen. And Yechiel Spira says, I tried not to look at him. I was too ashamed to look at him. But suddenly my eyes were locked in his. And I tried to look away, but there was no way to escape the gaze of this big tzaddik over here. And I realized at that moment that he wanted the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash more than anything that I ever wanted in my entire life. And that's what we're holding today. The Beis HaMikdash, not just for us, not just for our families, not just for our kehilas, not just for our communities, not just for Klal Yisrael. The Beis HaMikdash is because the world itself is literally falling apart by the seams. And the longer that we live in a world where there's not a Beis HaMikdash, the longer that we hears and our cries, and may He build the building of the Beis HaMikdash, B'mheira v'yameinu, Kinnos number 8. What was destroyed with inside the Beis HaMikdash. And that is that once there was no longer Beis HaMikdash, so we lost everything that the Beis HaMikdash represented. And at the center of the Beis HaMikdash was the avodah of the Kohanim of our Torah, the way that we once had. And when we look through the world and we see how many leaders have been destroyed, when we look through the world and we see how many Rabbanim have been embarrassed, and how many of them are defamed, and how many of them are not given the proper kavod and the honor that they deserve. And when we look at our generation and we see that we simply don't have the leaders that we once upon a time had. I once spoke to a Rosh Kollel in Eretz Yisrael. He told me that when he was a bacher learning in yeshiva, so he was very close to many of the Gedolei Yisrael, the great leaders that were living in Bnei Brak at the time. He was close to the Stipler. He was close to Rav Shach. He was close to some of the other, remember all the names, some of the other big names that were there at that time. He said when he was about 18 or 19 years old, so his parents, he lived out of the country, and his parents called him back home. They wanted him to go and to get a shidduch. So he was home in his home country for maybe about 3 years. He was learning there, he got married, he was doing some work over there. So when he came back to Eretz Yisrael, the stipler had already passed away. I think Rashach was still alive, but the stipler and a few others had already passed away by the time he got back. And he said that when he came back and he was looking for Gedolei Yisrael, he was looking for great leaders of the Jewish people. Nobody could pale in comparison to the Gedolim, to the leaders that he was around just those several years before. And this is part of what we are lacking. The Rabbanim are called the Einei Ha'eda. They are called the eyes of our generation, of our nation. They are the ones that give us the ability to be able to see, to deal with the challenges of our generation, of history. They are the ones that give us aids to the loss of those that are no longer here. We have to ask ourselves as well if we have to make sure that we are living up to the void that was created by those that are no longer in this world. There's a beautiful story that Rav Yaakov Bender tells over. Rav Yaakov Bender is the Rosh Hashiva of Darche in New York. And there was an asifa, there was a gathering for the internet, for parents, that they should come and they should realize how important it is that they have, if they have internet, that at least they should have filters on their phones, on their computers, to protect the children. The children should understand, and they should understand that it's something that is very crucial. But the main thrust of that gathering was not so much to convince the parents that internet is something you have to be in control of, but rather they should understand that since that the neshamas of your children are so precious, and they're so valuable and they're so holy, you need to make sure that you treat them with the proper dignity and respect that a Yiddish neshama, that the neshamas of our children deserve. So he told over the following story. When he was a younger man, which means when he was learning in Kollel, in the Mir Yeshiva in New York, the Rosh Yeshiva there was of Shmuel Berenbaum. And there was a boy in the yeshiva at that time, a bacher, who had gotten himself involved with gambling. He had a gambling issue, and everybody knew about it. He would go off at nights, wherever, I don't know, he went to Atlantic City, whatever he did. He had a real problem. He was gambling. And Rabbi Bender, who was a young married man at the time, and some of the other young married men in the kollel there, they decided that this bacher, this boy, was bad news for the yeshiva. And they were afraid that he was going to influence other boys. And before you knew it, there'd be a pandemic of gambling going on in the yeshiva. So they decided the only thing to do is they got to kick him out of the yeshiva. But they can't kick him out themselves. They're not in charge of the yeshiva. So they went to the Rosh Hashiva, Rav Shmuel Berenbaum, and they asked him, they told him the story, they told him that they were concerned about over there, and they said they believe that they should have this boy asked to leave the yeshiva because he's going to be a bad influence on the other boys that are there. So Shmuel Berenbaum thought for a moment, and he said, certainly, if you are willing to make such a decision of kicking a boy out of the yeshiva, it must be that you fasted for 40 days already. For a decision like this is tantamount to something else that he mentioned, which requires fasting for 40 days in a row in order to be able to make such a decision like that. You realize that if we kick this boy out of the yeshiva, and he ends up going down a really dangerous path, you realize that we're going to be held accountable, that because that we did not have the proper mercy and compassion on him and do whatever we could to keep him here and rehabilitate him, he went into the path that he did. So this boy's entire spiritual existence is hinging on this decision. Did you fast 40 days yet to make sure that this is the right thing for you to do? So obviously none of them have had. They didn't think about it like that. So Birnbaum said, I'll take care of it. So what did Rav Shmuel Birnbaum do? He went over to the boy and he said, we're going to be chavrusas. We're going to start learning together. And this boy, who was the undercover gambler of the Mir Yeshiva, suddenly became the chavrusa of the Rosh Yeshiva of Shmuel Berenbaum. When your Rosh Hashiva is Rav Shmuel Berenbaum, who has a long white beard and his face is shining, and he's a holy man, and you're learning the depths of Torah together with him, you're not going at nights to Atlantic City to gamble anymore. And Rav Shmuel Berenbaum, he rehabilitated this boy till he got to the point where he broke his gambling streak altogether. And he was once again a dedicated member of the yeshiva. And his life turned around, and as a result, he went on to live a life of mitzvahs and of Torah happily ever after. So Rav Yaakov Bender told over this Maisa, and he was telling over, he wanted all the parents to know, you realize, a half ago Rabbi Bender was speaking, and he spoke about this boy who was gambling, and the guys in the yeshiva wanted to throw him out. And he mentioned over there that if you're going to kick him out of the yeshiva, it must be that for his spiritual welfare, you should have had 40 fasts in order to make sure that you're doing the right thing. She said, I thought to myself, my son is suffering spiritually. My son is not growing in yeshiva the way that I would like him to, the way that he could. So how can I just throw in the towel? I'm going to fast 40 days for my son to make sure that he has success in yeshiva. She says, Rebbe, I want to tell you, it was not easy. I go to work every day, and there were parties going on, and there were events that took place, and there was food all around, and I had to excuse myself every single time. I can't eat. I went to weddings, I didn't eat. I went to brises and bar mitzvahs, I didn't eat. 40 days I didn't eat for my son. But I guess it works, she said. Baruch Hashem. And this, says the Kinnos over here, where do we learn such a thing from? We don't learn it. You trust the younger man, you trust the young guy in yeshiva and kollel, he'll make the wrong decision. Get out of him, get rid of him, kick him out. But if you go to Gedolei Hador, you go to the great leaders of our generation. You go to the Rosh Yeshivas, you go to people whose minds are swimming with Torah and with Kedusha and with holiness. So you get the right answer. We don't have so many people like that left. We don't have the Kohanim from the Beis Hamikdash. We don't have the Leviim singing their songs. We don't have the great Nevi'im, the prophets of that time, who are on the loftiest of all levels. We don't have them. Even in our time, we don't have all of the leaders that we once had. So for this, we cry. Kina number 10. Kina number 11 is a very famous kina, and it's a little bit along the lines of what we started saying in the last one. This kina is about Yoshiyahu HaMelech. Yoshiyahu was a very famous king in Klal Yisrael, we just have to get a little bit of a historical background to appreciate exactly what's going on over here. Because the death of Yoshiyahu Melech was really a great tragedy, and as we'll see over here, but when it and they were that took Klal Yisrael down very, very bad roads of Averis and Avodah Zarah. And when his father Ammon died, Yoshiyahu was only 8 years old. I guess if you're in Egypt and you're King Tut, so 8 years old is old enough to be a king. But in Eretz Yisrael, so the king had to be able to understand what was going on and run the country properly. And 8 years old was too young to really take reins of the kingdom. So for the first 10 years of his reign, so really his advisors and the wise men that were around him, they helped him to be able to run the country properly. However, when he became 18 years old, he was able to take over the kingdom. But let's remember a single word of Gemara. Imagine a manayil of a school who doesn't know what the Aleph Beis is. Yoshiyahu Melech was a king that came from a house of idol worshippers and Rishonim and wicked people. They didn't teach him anything at all about Yiddishkeit. So he comes 18 years old. He is the king of the Jewish people, and he doesn't know a thing at all about what it means to be a Jew. So he began to search. It bothered him. How can I be the Melech of Klal Yisrael, the king of the Jewish people, run the Jewish nation in a Jewish country called Eretz Yisrael, and not know what it means to be a Jew? So he began searching, and he began looking. And the story is told, as Chazal teach us, that he was looking in the base of Mikdash and he found a Sefer Torah. There's a special Sefer Torah that only the king keeps on himself. And it had been hidden away. No one of the kings didn't want to see it. And he found it, he opened it up. And it said over there in the Sefer Torah that, Ora Azeh, cursed is the one who doesn't uphold the words of the Torah. And his hair stood on end and he realized, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking to me. Cursed is the one who does not uphold the words of this Sefer Torah. And that began, he was the first Baal Tshuva. This is like the real Tshuva movement taking place in Eretz Yisrael, before Eshetar, before Sameach, before all of that took place. He began going on a search. So he began looking for sages, and he looked for Rabbanim, and he looked for the emes, for the truth. And it led him to a life of Torah and of mitzvahs. But that wasn't enough for him. That was not enough. He said, if I became from, and I'm coming from two of the most wicked kings, the most wicked offspring you could possibly imagine, then why shouldn't all of Klal Yisrael become from? And he went on a campaign. He said, imagine what's going. This is before WhatsApp. You can't, no Twitter, no nothing. You had to go town to town, house to house, region to region. And he went all around, because there were a lot of Rishonim that were around in those times that were making it very difficult for him. And they refused to go along with the Tshuva movement. And they preferred to worship Avodah Zarah besides him. So what did they do? Okay, so fine. So they had all different things that they used to do in order to be able to hide, conceal themselves from what Yoshiyahu wanted them to do. And the Averis continued to go on. And even though Yoshiyahu was doing all this incredible work, nevertheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided that with all that Yoshiyahu was adding to the Jewish people, so then it was time for him to leave Klal Yisrael. So what happened? It's a very cryptic story which took place over here. And basically, there was a Paro whose name was Paro Nechai. And Paro asked if his army could come through the north of Eretz Yisrael. He said, we're not going to go into battle with you, in war. We're just heading out to battle against Aram. And it will help us if we can pass through Eretz Yisrael. Yoshiyahu remembered something that he learned in the Torah, and it says that a sword will not pass through your land. So he said, I'm sorry, the Torah says that a sword cannot pass through our land. So you are on your way to go and fight a battle, you can't pass through our land. And that means, Chazal tell us that even when there's a sword of peace, should not come through the land. So he said, you know what? There's no way that I can let you pass through the land. Now, what he didn't realize that that's only when the Jewish people are living the way that Klal Yisrael is supposed to live their lives. When Eretz Yisrael is in a state of shleimus, of completeness, and Klal Yisrael is living a life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is happy with the way that they're living, then it's true, there should be no armies that are going to pass through the land. And Yoshiyahu didn't know that there were these serving of the blessing of not having any armies pass through our lands. So he made an additional mistake, besides that he interpreted it wrong. Number two, he didn't go and ask the prophet Yirmiyahu Navi what he should do. Now Yirmiyahu was his leader, was his Rebbe that he went to for everything. And there's two versions of it. Either he didn't ask Yirmiyahu at all, which was obviously a terrible mistake. He made a decision on his own, which was something that had to do place with the nation of Klal Yisrael. Or he asked Yirmiyahu Navi, and Yirmiyahu told him, let them pass through the land, and he overruled on Yirmiyahu Navi. Whichever it was, either one is not good. And eventually a battle ended up breaking out over here, and Yoshiyahu came with his army to fight against Paro Nechai and his army over there. And unfortunately, there was a arrow that ended up flying, and it ended up catching Yoshiyahu, and he ended up actually 300 arrows pierced his body, and he ended up being on his final moments of death when Yirmiyahu Navi was coming to run to see what had happened. Now Yirmiyahu was very concerned because he had heard that either he didn't listen to his advice or he didn't ask for advice, and he thought that maybe Yoshiyahu had really rebelled against him as well, and also had veered off the path of tshuva. However, when he got there, he saw his lips moving, and he heard the words, Tzadiku Hashem ki pihu marisi. Hashem is righteous because I rebelled against his words. And he was saying, I deserved whatever it is that happened to me. So when Yirmiyahu heard what was going on, he read Kinnos over Yoshiyahu. And that is this Kinnos over here that we say right now. And this, the truth of the matter is something that we have to think about, because the story of Yoshiyahu is something that for all of us, there's something that we can take away. Yoshiyahu grew up not from. He grew up amongst Rishayim. He grew up without any knowledge of all of what Yiddishkeit is. But the moment that he realized that the Torah is emes, and the moment that he realized how fulfilling it is and what a life it is and what it means to commit yourself and dedicate yourself to Yiddishkeit, he says, I can't just keep that to myself. I have to go and share that with the rest of the world around me. And he went on his campaign to be makar of one after the other to make sure that they would also see the beauty and the light of Yiddishkeit. My wife recently finished reading the book on Remsen Jungreis. This book has gotten me into more trouble than ever before, because Remsen Jungreis was a woman. She was, I don't know, I think she was about this tall. She was approximately 4'8" or 4'9", I believe that was her height, with heels maybe 4'10". She was a woman she went through the Holocaust at the age, I think, of about 7 or 8 years old. She survived miraculously with her father, and I believe, and her mother also. She came to America. And they were the only religious Jews living in the area where she was. And her father taught at a very young age, our mission in this world is to bring the light of Torah to the Jewish people. And he used to tell her, when you go to school and you find Jewish friends, invite them to our house for Shabbos. She said, that kind of sandwich. The guy gets very upset. I think the way the story goes, it sounds like he didn't end up eating, and he ended up taking some other food that there was. He ate something else that was less treif. But the rest of the journey, they don't talk to each other. The flight is over, everybody gets up, he doesn't even look at her. She looks, nothing, no conversation at all. They go down to baggage claim, and lo and behold, as she's getting her baggage and about to leave the airport, who does she bump into? None other than this guy over here. And he walks right over to her and he looks at her and he says, lady, I want to tell you one more time, you are crazy. He says, you think you're going to sit on an airplane and tell me, a Jew, what I can eat, what I can't eat? You're crazy to even say such a thing. So Remsen Jungreis, no compulsion, nothing. She's not fazed at all. She's been through this 1,000 times already. She says, you know what? You look like you have a very beautiful Jewish neshama, beautiful Jewish soul. I'm a Rebbitzin. I have a special organization called Hineni. She pulls out her card. She says, one day, When you'd like to have a tour of the beautiful religion that you come from, give me a call and I'll be happy to tell